Hey everyone, I'm 35, female, and I've been married to my husband, 35, male, for 7 years now. We got married when we found out I was pregnant. We have a beautiful 7-year-old daughter, Amy. Our marriage was welcomed by my sister-in-law, 32, female. As I have been dating my husband since we were 20, I have grown close with my sister-in-law as well. So when she learned that I was having a baby and she was going to be an aunt, she was ecstatic. But the same cannot be said for someone else. That someone else is my mother-in-law, 57, female. My mother-in-law had my husband when she was 22. Owing to their conservative family background, mother-in-law and father-in-law got married, but in mother-in-law's eyes, getting her pregnant and marrying her when she was 22 was just a ploy to have her trapped. When her first child was a boy, my mother-in-law was not happy. In her eyes, she was being pushed into the corner by father-in-law intentionally. Father-in-law did not want another child, but mother-in-law insisted on having another child, which led to them having sister-in-law. Since sister-in-law was born, mother-in-law made it evident that she had no interest in anyone in the family except sister-in-law. She prioritized sister-in-law every step of the way, which led to my husband growing up quite neglected. When I heard about all this, I assumed sister-in-law was aware of these things and she allowed my husband to be treated this way. But my misconceptions were cleared out once I met sister-in-law myself. Sister-in-law is a very sweet person. She was aware of the bias that mother-in-law had against my husband, and she had done her best to make sure my husband was not treated like that. But when they were teens, doing that was more difficult. Since they have both become adults and moved out, my sister-in-law and husband repaired their relationship. When I met my husband, they were just starting to repair their relationship, which is why I assumed sister-in-law was a bad person. But since we cleared everything up, things were smooth sailing between us. During our dating years, I saw how differently mother-in-law treated my sister-in-law and my husband. Sister-in-law was the golden child in her eyes. Anything sister-in-law did was perfect and amazing, and whatever my husband did was terrible. I distinctly remember one time when I was over for dinner, me, sister-in-law, and my husband were chatting in the kitchen when sister-in-law broke a glass in the kitchen. She bumped into it and it fell. Mother-in-law rushed into the kitchen when she heard the noise of glass breaking, and the first thing she did was start screaming at my husband. We were 24 at the time. It was surreal to see her act like that. I had heard tales of blatant favoritism and emotional abuse, but that day I saw it. I heard how mother-in-law kept bashing my husband, saying how she should have never gone through with the pregnancy and she would have been much happier had it just been sister-in-law. It hurt me to see him being treated like that, honestly. Once she was done screaming at my husband, my sister-in-law told mother-in-law that it was her, and mother-in-law refused to believe her. Mother-in-law told sister-in-law to not cover up for my husband. Over the years, I noticed how vicariously mother-in-law lives through sister-in-law. Whenever sister-in-law does something, mother-in-law would go out of her way to make it a huge deal, even though sister-in-law herself hated it. Based on our chats, sister-in-law is an introvert and she hates being the center of attention because that's all she has known since she was a kid, thanks to mother-in-law. And that causes her a lot of anxiety. But that doesn't stop mother-in-law from not giving her a break. She repeatedly puts pressure on sister-in-law and makes a big deal out of every small achievement of sister-in-law. Now, I'm telling you all this because I need you to understand how crazy my mother-in-law is about my sister-in-law having the spotlight. When my daughter Amy was born, the attention definitely shifted to her because, as one knows, Amy is a baby. Everyone at every family gathering since Amy's birth was more concerned about her well-being than hearing about sister-in-law being an employee of the month. Sister-in-law was very happy with that, as that gave her a much-needed social break she needed. She used to dread coming to family dinners, but since Amy was born, sister-in-law felt less anxious. She would come, play with Amy, chat with my husband, awkwardly deal with mother-in-law's comments about her achievement, and then slip away. Sister-in-law jokingly told me to get a few more babies so that mother-in-law didn't get the opportunity to mention her name at family gatherings. And even when she does, sister-in-law can be busy with her nieces and nephews. So you can understand the family situation. On my daughter's 7th birthday, my husband and I decided to host a big get-together. Owing to COVID, we weren't able to host gatherings, and that has caused quite disgruntled feelings from my mother-in-law. So we thought it would be perfect to celebrate Thanksgiving and my daughter's birthday together. Accordingly, we sent out invitations and prepared for the gathering. The night before the gathering, I got a call from my sister-in-law. The moment I picked up the call, she was in hysterics. She sounded like she was on the verge of a mental breakdown. That worried both me and my husband. When we finally managed to calm her down, she told me that I should uninvite mother-in-law right then. I couldn't quite understand why, and sister-in-law explained that there might be something that mother-in-law is planning to do on Amy's birthday, which could be hurtful to Amy. I asked her what she even meant, and sister-in-law said that mother-in-law told her how upset she is with Amy. Since Amy was born, sister-in-law is not getting attention from the extended family, and that bothered mother-in-law a lot. So she was going to prove to the whole family that I have been lying about Amy's allergies. Hearing that made me panic, obviously. I told my husband that mother-in-law was planning on doing that, and my husband suggested we don't uninvite her and instead see if things were true, as sister-in-law was suggesting. If it is true, we can catch her red-handed, and after that, if we go no contact with her, no one would be able to blame us. His logic, although dangerous, made sense to me. I asked sister-in-law to keep screenshots of the chat, and we patiently waited for the dinner. Mother-in-law showed up with a pan full of brownies as dessert. Since the moment she came in, she repeatedly asked Amy if she was excited about the brownie that Nana made, especially for her. Amy, as a child, was understandably excited, and I couldn't interject because I didn't have any proof. That was until it was time for dessert. Mother-in-law said she will cut the brownie and the first bite is for the birthday girl. The moment she cut the cake and held it out to Amy, I took it from her hand. Everybody was shocked at my behavior. Mother-in-law was just about to start screaming when it dug into the slice and took out a big piece of walnut. Amy is deathly allergic to walnuts, and everybody knew that. I explained to Amy that she can't have the brownie and she should go with her father to the kitchen for some ice cream instead. Once she had left with her father, I told everyone about the reason why mother-in-law did this. Mother-in-law tried to argue and say that I'm lying, but she failed when sister-in-law backed me up. It was a shit show. She was screaming at me and then pleaded with sister-in-law to take her side instead. The whole family saw mother-in-law for who she truly was and how far she was willing to go, and since then the extended family has cut contact with mother-in-law. Mother-in-law has not taken too kindly to it and has been calling me an a-hole for ruining everything. I don't think I was TA, but I would like an outside perspective just in case I was TA somewhere. Thank you. Update 1. My husband and sister-in-law have been dealing with hateful calls from mother-in-law since I last updated you guys. Mother-in-law can't believe that her kids chose a stranger, me, over her, and she expected them to take her side. Both my husband and sister-in-law explained that what she did was completely disgusting because she was trying to put my child in the hospital over something so petty. I heard my husband call my mother-in-law a monster and heartless, after which mother-in-law stopped calling him. On the other hand, sister-in-law has blocked mother-in-law because mother-in-law told her that she was doing it for sister-in-law's sake, and now that it backfired. Sister-in-law shouldn't take back her support, even though sister-in-law never supported her in the first place. It is a whole mess. I do not know what I'm supposed to do. Update 2. I know I'm not an a-hole for protecting my child, but I'll be lying if I said that this doesn't break my heart. I feel like I ruined the relationship. Well, whatever relationship my husband had with his mom because of this, since Amy's birthday, my husband has been avoiding his mother like a plague. While that upsets me, I cannot say that I do not understand. It took a huge toll on him when he saw that his mom was willing to hurt his child just to get attention back on his sister. I feel so terrible. I don't know what to do. Update 3. Thanks for all the kind words you guys have left in the DMs and the comments. I can never thank you guys enough for being so kind to me. I wish I had some good news, but I don't. Since my last update, my husband too has blocked mother-in-law. I have tried to get him to talk about his feelings with me, but he hasn't. I don't think he's quite ready. As someone said in the comments, it must be difficult for him to accept the loss of a parent who is physically present but mentally absent. But I'm trying to be as supportive as possible. I feel like that is the only thing I can do at this point. Hey, OP, NTA, you protected your child the way you knew. Your husband's relationship with his mom was already dead because your mother-in-law never treated him like her child. I don't think you should feel guilty. Support him and make sure he knows that you're here for him because that is what he needs right now. NTA, OP, you did what any mama bear would do. As far as your husband's concerned, I feel so bad for him. It must be difficult for him to deal with the loss of a parent who is physically here but not emotionally. Make sure he feels wanted and loved, and I think it would help. Maybe therapy can help too. Next story. My grandma, Granny, 93, female, is living in a nursing home. As her memory and physical ability started to decline, the family moved her into a home where she is now doing surprisingly well. Granny probably has dementia, but we have not bothered to get a formal diagnosis as it wouldn't change anything in how we care for her. Granny still uses a walker, but she has been slowly getting weaker over the last several months. She used to get up independently, but one night she fell off the toilet and was on the floor for a short time, thankfully with no injury. As she forgets to use the call bell, she has a bed alarm for safety. She also always has someone walk beside her due to the fall risk, and if she goes to the bathroom, a staff member will wait right outside the door for her to finish. This is because Granny will always accept help, but she will never ask for it. This is important for later. Myself, 38 male, and my brothers, 40 male, 42 male, enjoy taking her to her favorite Italian restaurant. When we park in a handicapped space and assist her with walking, she manages nicely. The last time I took her, she needed to use the bathroom after the meal. Being aware of her fall risk, I went to the woman's washroom. I opened the door a crack, asked loudly, "Is anyone in here?" And when there was no reply, took my grandma in. After assisting her to the toilet, I closed the stall door and stood right outside. During this time, a middle-aged woman walked in and was visibly taken aback by my presence. I apologized, saying my grandmother was using the bathroom and that we would be done quickly and to please feel free to use the facilities. She walked out without a word. A minute or so later, I took Granny out of the bathroom, walker and all. The woman was waiting outside for us, and as we left, she went in, muttering loud enough that I should have taken her to the men's washroom if I was there with her. I said nothing, not wanting to cause any conflict, and took Granny back to home. Afterwards, this did get me thinking. I have my grandma's well-being first and foremost in my mind, but I certainly don't want to make anyone else uncomfortable by going into a woman's washroom. My wife and one brother thought I did the right thing, but other family members thought I was the a-hole and looked like a creep. I replied that as a woman, Granny has the right to use a woman's washroom, and as someone who was her caretaker at that moment, I go where she goes for her own safety. Am I the a-hole for taking a disabled, handicapped woman to a woman's washroom when I am a man? For reference, the restaurant does not have a family or mixed washroom, or I'd absolutely take her there. NTA, your grandmother needed help and there were no females with your group at the restaurant and no family mixed bathroom. As a female, your granny has the right to use the women's bathroom, and you didn't violate anyone else's rights while assisting her. You merely waited outside of the stall until she was done and then left when your granny was done. You didn't do anything inappropriate, and you didn't disrespect anyone. The lady and your other family members are overreacting to you simply helping your granny, who is a fall risk, to go to the bathroom safely. NTA, I don't see how you'd make people uncomfortable when you're visibly there with your very elderly grandmother. It's not like you're on your own or just loitering and telling people you're with your grandmother. I imagine if, when there are disabled stalls, you take her to those. If not, then you might be better off doing that when possible, both to avoid these situations and because there are handrails and more space, so it might be easier for her too. But if that's not an option, I think what you're doing is fine. Taking an elderly woman into a men's restroom where there are urinals feels less respectful of her privacy than you accompanying her into the women's restroom, where other women will more often than not understand the context and be fine with it. Next story. I, 22, female, am very close with my mother. My mother came out as bi and has been dating this girl, Sylvia, for about 2 years. My father was the love of my mother's life, but he passed away about 10 years ago. They were together since high school and friends since the fourth grade. It was like a fairy tale. This incident has nothing to do with me not wanting my mother to move on because I want my mother happy. She deserves it. Basically, Sylvia has always said this thing about her being my mom's one true love and how fate put them together. I always ignored this and let her say what she wanted to say, but I have a younger sister, age 13, who Sylvia tells this to. My sister came to me and said that Sylvia told her this, and when my sister brought up my dad, Sylvia said my parents weren't really soulmates, but just two people that fell in love and were chapters in each other's books, and that Sylvia was my mother's true love. I confronted Sylvia on this because she shouldn't say things like that to my sister. I basically just said to Sylvia to stop saying she was my mom's one true love because that wasn't true. My dad was. This caused a huge argument between Sylvia and I, and she accused me of just not wanting my mother to move on and be happy. I told her that wasn't the case, and that she shouldn't be telling my sister that my father wasn't our mother's soulmate. She then said I was living in a fantasy and that my father has passed for a decade now and that I was being a selfish bitch and needed to let my mother move on, completely ignoring my point. She's now asked me not to come by the house when she's home. My mother is currently in the hospital, and I haven't told her any of this because I don't want to stress her out. I can't even come to the house and see my sister. I really don't think I'm the a-hole. I just stated my mind. NTA, Sylvia sounds insecure and narcissistic as heck to be playing this game where she is in competition with your deceased father. The way she's speaking to you and your sister is extremely inappropriate and honestly bizarre. Her behavior sounds like that of a jealous teenager. I know you said your mother is in hospital and you don't wish to upset her, but I think she would want to know how her children are being treated by her partner. I would tell your mother right away for your sister's sake. You are able to leave the situation, but your sister is stuck around this clearly unwell person, and that's not right. NTA, first of all, if it's your mother's house and she isn't married to Sylvia, she can't really stop you from coming over just because she is there. Secondly, what she's saying to your sister is highly inappropriate and honestly not even necessary. Although this is a conversation your mother needs to have with her, not you. Of course, your mother deserves to move on and find someone to love, but that doesn't mean her love for her deceased husband is no more. Also, you can't speak for your mother on her love life because only she is the judge of that. But good for you for trying to stick with your sister. But you need to tell your mother this. NTA. If anything, it sounds like Sylvia is jealous of the relationship your parents had and feels threatened by it. From the sound of it, in my opinion, I'd say it seems like she's feeling jealous of memory, and in feeling that way, she's stooping so low that she is competing with a dead person. If she was only making these comments to you alone, maybe you might have been able to deal with it, I'm guessing. But telling your sister, your little sister, that her late father was only a chapter in her mother's life, that was crossing a line. I may be biased because I always feel bad whenever anyone says anything that hurts my own little sister, but I really don't think you've done anything wrong. Your mother's new girlfriend needs to accept that your dad was, is, and always will be an important part of all your lives, even if just as a treasured memory. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.